Now, it's pretty appropriate if, in the distance during this little talk, you can hear fireworks, because it is actually approaching Guy Fawkes on this particular day. But it's appropriate because the composer I'm going to be talking about truly lit up the skies in the 20th century. His name, Béla Bartók, a Hungarian master who wrote music of great vividness and variety, ballet works, instrumental works, vocal works, wonderful piano works, but the string quartets are perhaps his greatest achievement in the instrumental realm. The greatest set of quartets, I would say, after Beethoven's, and I'm not sure they've been equalled since Bartók wrote his quartets. Now, let me play you to start with one of the most beautiful passages from the quartets, and that's the end of the last one, when Bartók was hardly at ease with his life. He was soon to go to America, and he was leaving a lot behind. Full of sentiment, his country was going to be overrun by the Nazis before long. He was violently anti-fascist and full of emotion for what he was going to lose, and this comes across very much in this music. Now, that was the last movement of Bartók's last quartet, marked Mesto, or sad. We'll revisit that before I finish this little talk with a humorous passage from it, because, believe me, there's plenty of humour in Bartók's music. But first of all, a piece of music that I would use to attract young people to the world of so-called classical music. This is from the fourth quartet, and I actually had an experience of introducing kids to this music myself personally, which I will tell you about when I've played you this. Now, I'll tell you something about it. That's the fifth movement of Bartók's fourth quartet. Years ago, I used to run the record side of a hi-fi and record shop, and one day a group of kids came in wanting a pop record. I can't remember what it was, but while I was listening to it, I played it for them. I thought, this is a bit like the last movement of Bartók's fourth quartet. And I put it on. They were mad for the Bartók. They loved it. In fact, they left the shop, not with the pop record, but with the Bartók. They didn't pay for it, but you can't have it all. Anyway, I've used that music to convert countless young people to the cause of serious music. And not only that, some other pieces that I'm going to be playing you. My own kid, my own youngest daughter, is a very good example. My daughter Vicky, she loved insects when she was young, as a toddler. Bartók also loved insects, and the movement before that finale is played on pizzicato or plucked strings, and it's typical of that very tactile type of music that Bartók wrote for what he called his night music. And night music actually portrayed in musical terms things that go bump in the night. It's nocturnal music in the truest sense of the word, probably more nocturnal than any nocturne you're ever likely to hear. But this is that movement, or part of it. Now, that was the fourth movement, or part of the fourth movement of Bartók's fourth quartet, but it's not the only quartet that includes nocturnal or night music elements. There are plenty of other passages in them, including the second quartet. Now, That's very different. The second movement of the second quartet is a folky, a rough-hewn, folky dance movement. And the end of it, the coda, is very quiet. Again, things that go scurrying in the night. Very exciting, especially as played on this recording by the Emerson String Quartet. Close of, or part of the close of the second movement of Bartók's second quartet. I say the Emerson quartet's a terrific cycle, but there are recordings about the Hagen quartet, the Vey quartet, the Hungarian quartet, the Juilliard quartet, the Tokacs quartet. Marvellous versions, so there's no shortage of fine recordings of these works. Now, the next element in Bartók's quartet writing I want to address is the romantic element. His first quartet reflects his passion for a young violinist. He had plenty of passions during his life, and this was a girl who he shared his love of music with. In fact, there was a particular theme that turns up in this quartet which is associated with her. But this is part of the third movement. Lovely music. Part of Bartók's first string quartet. Now the third is very, very different. It's about half the length of the first quartet. It's about 15 minutes. Very rigorously structured. Very tough music. It takes a bit of time to get into. Dovetailed elements are structured, beautifully structured. And again full of rhythmic impetus like the fourth, although not as clean cut as the fourth. The third quartet is more condensed. This is the coda, the end of the work, or a passage from the end of the work, where there's a dive bombing cello, and you get some idea of the impact that the whole piece has. Now this is real 1920s music, real tough music, and the third, maybe Bartók's greatest quartet, not necessarily the most appealing, but the one I think that is the most brilliantly constructed. Now the fifth is probably my favourite, because it's got some beautiful music in it, the two slow movements which reflect each other. They're symmetrically designed, the whole quartet is, but it's also got jazzy elements that you could associate with people like Stan Kenton and Duke Ellington. It's so striking when you listen to the first movement, which has real attack to it. Here it is, see what you think. This is the central section of it. That's part of the first movement of Bartók's fifth string quartet. But the third movement, which is a sort of folky scherzo, is even more jazzy than that is. Now, at the beginning of this little presentation, I played you the heartbreaking close of Bartók's Sixth Quartet. And to close this little talk, I'd like to play you a humorous aspect of the Sixth Quartet, which is almost like a sort of burlesque, like vaudeville. Nothing like it in the rest of the work. Well, in another movement, there's another passage that's a little bit like it, but it just shows you that for this last quartet of Bartók, he brought together all the elements: the rhythm, the humour, the pathos, the invention. It's all there, but this is quite unexpected when it arrives. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching.